Oh, hello, and welcome from El Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist.
And I'm Dr. Leviathan.
And we're here to ask you to listen to our podcast. If you like those internet stories, most creepy and most pasta,
or just want to listen to two friends put their gray matter through the meat grinder,
come check us out at El Dente Rigamortis. We're on Kiwi 6, iTunes, YouTube, and Tumblr. New posts every Thursday. See you there, and until then, sleep well.
This is Ross Payton with Role Playing Public Radio. This is RPPR episode 112, Campaigns I Shan't Be Running. And with me, not as always, is Caleb here.
Hello.
Yes, Tom is unavailable tonight, but we need to get an episode out, because of my very strict and, scheduling things.
It's like a factory here.
Yeah, like clockwork.
Yeah.
The clocks were terrible at keeping time.
Victorian child slaves shoveling coal into a massive boiler to power the microphones.
So in this episode, we're going to be talking about campaigns that we would like to run or thought about running, but will almost certainly not be running for various reasons.
And what we've learned.
And
why we've avoided those campaigns.
Yeah, exactly.
Mistakes we've yet to make.
Mistakes we see that pothole and we're trying to veer around
Yes.
it so we can get into that cliff. And the metaphor kind of loses meaning after that. So, anyway, in news, we do have some news. Raillery is back up and running, thanks to Aaron. He is posting a lot of videos to our YouTube channel to go through Darkest Dungeon, a game I've talked about earlier in the podcast. And Darkest Dungeon is a Lovecraftian dungeon crawling game, and where you control a roster of adventurers, and when they die for good.
It's kind of like watching a puppy try and read Nietzsche. Yeah, it's not the game you would picture Aaron doing an actual play for.
But
so
I think
that's its charm.
He names the characters after us and our characters in games, and we haven't done that well.
I'm a leper.
You're a leopard. I was an occultist once. So there's already 6 episodes as of this recording. So it's over an hour of goodness. So if you like video games and Aaron watching his hapless adventurers die horrible deaths.
If this is successful, we still haven't spoiled Spec Ops: The Line for him.
Yes.
So we will film his face if he does that. Listen and comment, and he will be despairing for all of your enjoyment.
And finally, we have a new contest for all of you out there, a fan creation contest. This is going to be done with the help of Arc Dream, who they've donated some books for us. So there'll be prizes, actual Arc Dream role-playing games, and of course some copies of Base Raiders, Zombies of the World, and other little gift ideas or rewards. So the details of the contest will be on the RPPR forums. I'll have a link in the show notes. But to go over it briefly, this will be a fan creation contest. So something about some sort of about our actual play episode. So create something to commemorate one of our memorable incidents in an Arc Dream game. These can be the categories will be in art, like draw, 2D art, video, audio, written, and other. And there will also be categories for every game itself. So Wild Talents, Cthulhu, because Unspeakable Oath, that counts.
Yeah.
Monsters and Other Childish Things, Better Angels, and A Dirty World. So there's plenty of rewards. There's plenty of awards, I guess. So yeah.
So you could also do multimedia projects, such as the montage of Aaron character deaths set to "Oh What You Say" that needs to be done.
Yeah, this is true.
We need that work.
There will be, let's add death montage as a new category.
All right, yes.
It can, because it's not just Aaron. I mean, we've had many memorable player deaths.
We have.
So we could have something in the final Revelation or in Revelation Spring. So lots of good stuff there. So there will be, I'll give it a pretty lengthy thing, so you'll have time to make it for the deadline. I would say make it May 15th. That'll give people quite a bit of time to make something really special. So we look forward to your creations. So Anyways, so this episode we're talking about campaigns you will never run. Or I won't be running, or Caleb won't be running, because a lot of times we get ideas for campaigns and then we realize, much to our chagrin, that it's just not going to happen.
That would be a terrible idea.
Yeah. So
this comes from a series of blog posts on Charles Stross's blog, Books I Will Not Write, in which he details the plots and what he's doing and what he did to plan for a book he did not write. And then explains why that is not the book he wrote. Like, it either morphed into a different book or it didn't make sense in publishing or anything like that. So he always comes up with some sort of, because he's Charles Stross, he always comes up with some sort of illustrative and very insightful takeaway from describing this book that does not exist. So I thought maybe in describing campaigns we shan't be running, we could come up with some useful tenets for running games for your own group.
Yeah. Because I think this happens to a lot of gaming groups sooner or later, is that, someone tries to run a game that they shouldn't be running for that particular group. And that's, to preface, every group has its own preferences. This is not to say the campaigns we're going to be talking about are bad inherently. They're just not going to fit our particular, people and time and other variables.
Some of the ideas are bad inherently, and that is a possibility. I probably have a few I'll mention, but others are just like, it's not the time nor the place.
I know, for example, I'll just go first and mention the first campaign. Well, it's not even a specific campaign, but I know the type of campaign I will never run for this group. I shan't be running a dungeon crawling campaign, and it doesn't even matter what system I'd be running it in, whether it's 5e D&D or 4e or Hackmaster or whatever. It's just this group, the RPPR group, is not a big fan of mapping out dungeons, checking for traps, and killing rooms filled with orcs. Even if there's really good reasons to kill them,
Can we crawl through those dungeons and then negotiate treaties with its inhabitants?
Well, some of them, yes, but sooner or later you're going to have to get your hands...
Can we engineer a proxy bush war between them and take over the spoils?
Yeah, dungeon colonialism, is that what you're going for?
I'm always playing blank colonialism, Ross.
All right, fair enough. But you see, this is why. Like, a lot of our players don't care for tactical combat. They don't like the XCOM-esque sort of version of role-playing.
We're like the CIA of role-playing groups.
Not fight fair. Let's just lie and cheat and steal.
Yes.
Not with the kill. Yeah, well, killing, but not if they shoot back. So that's
we'll sell drugs to our own people to fund these guns to shoot these bad guys. Errand morals.
If there's a sympathetic robot.
Yes, we will kill any amount of children to save the sympathetic robot.
Or Warforged. I'm sorry, this is a fantasy thing.
Yes, you're right.
So what was you had a campaign idea that that you wanted to run, but you shan't be running this.
I shan't be running it.
Yeah.
So I loved Night's Black Agents, and I think David enjoyed Night's Black Agents quite a bit. I think other players did not care for it as much as David and I liked it.
I liked it, yeah.
It was a good campaign. I enjoyed it. You were running it.
Yeah.
But Jason was like a teenage girl who just had her phone confiscated for every game, just glowering at us and refusing to pronounce Japanese names. As if that was like a rebuke. Like, no, I won't say it. His name's Scott now. And Tom was a 6-point investigative forger sniper and a 19-year-old Japanese boy.
Who got his skills from playing Call of Duty.
Yeah, pretty much. So while I love that campaign, it was somewhat laborious on my part as a player to be like, no, your character needs to do this. Yeah, no, they're vampires. This is a game about all right, go to sleep. We'll tell you when it's over. And if the game is great, it's totally up my alley. And I actually based a whole campaign off of a book that Charles Stross wouldn't write. So it was the last Laundry Files novel with the vampires.
Yeah.
his original pitch for that wasn't as a Files novel. It was as vampires in the world of high finance. So it's about like micro trading and being a vampire in a world where you can make insane amounts of finance and live off your interest. So these super elite, like deathless immortals that run these gigantic financial institutions, and basically what they do to ensure their own survival more than to even gain their portfolios is they hunt down other immortals that haven't got with the times and just try and steal their loot. Like they try and destroy them and collect their, priceless rooms full of paintings or boxes of gold doubloons and all this stuff they did from old economies because they've learned to adapt. And so I read that, and I also read a comic by Jonathan Hickman, a short 4-run comic about a shadow economy where these KGB and CIA special agents start embezzling from the black budgets of their respective organizations, which is pretty easy to do when you don't list anything about the budget. But the thing is, you still have to find a way to quantify your expenses. So what they would do is just have their buddy across the way report enemy action that would be roughly equivalent to the money they stole. So they're basically validating each other's lies and fleecing the government for like private islands. And so my idea was that this is going on, and the intermediary between these two, red state, blue state, civil services and espionage who don't want to die, they want to get rich. The intermediary is this 14th century Venetian vampire who is like the proto financier, and it's called the Golgotha account. So it's just because basically the two criminals on each side of Jesus get off for free just by merit of where they got crucified. So they
you get salvation and you get salvation.
Yeah, because all those other guys in the field of hanging dead straight to hell, but those two skirted right in right on the forgiveness line. So that was the idea. It'd be world hopping all over the place, PMCs. It would take into account all sorts of like modern world events. Like I had a whole Syria adventure planned out that I completely redid, and it's still going on in the Syria Civil War, but it's all different now. And I was going to do it, and I wrote a ton of it, and I pitched it to Pelgrane, and they're like, "You've never given us anything before. This would be 200 pages." I'm like, "I know, so you're going to hire me, right?" And Kenneth Hyde just shook his head and got another drink at the bar. And so I'm like, well, I'll run it for the guys. And then I realized, no, I will not be running it for the guys for any number of reasons. So what are some of those reasons you think, Ross? Like, I know what they are, but what would you guess some of those reasons? It'd be a terrible idea.
Well, because I would be playing you, essentially, in that I would have to plan every goddamn thing. I would be playing the entire team. And so they would be there to quip and roll during combat, and that would be pretty much it. And I have a tendency to go off the handle a little more in terms of go a little more looser with the rules sometimes.
You want to go rogue like everybody else.
Yeah, exactly.
No one wants to play the straight man in RPPR. Yeah.
I can. I just...
You will if you have to.
I will
but
if
you
I
don't want to.
I don't want to. I'm always in the GM chair, and it's so much more fun. But yeah, there's that. So
I also realized that in keeping up with world events and like researching the dual citizenship required of Nicosia residents of, Cyprus, or the Turkish Republic of Cyprus, that Ross might care and do some homework, and no one else would have any idea.
Yeah.
Ross would like try something to learn about the culture, skim a Wikipedia page, and Tom would roll in with a cowboy hat covered in guns to every nation he went to. And it would, again, just be me playing a game with Ross by ourselves. While 3 other people sat and agonized through it. So if you would like to read the sadly abandoned Prezi for the Golgotha account, it is on my Prezi page. Just alone, dejected, and unfinished.
Well,
but
I'll put a link to it.
But the thing you should learn is you should definitely read the interest of your group.
Yeah.
And
they don't like dungeon crawl.
Read.
Well, they like to read.
They don't like to read like current events. They don't like to do homework for games.
For certain games. Like, I mean, if there was a Dresden Files game, I think that would be a different story because...
Yeah.
But that's another campaign that neither of us shan't be running, and neither will Dan, because Dan is...
Yeah.
Dan has talked about this.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And also, Dan and I have played it.
Yeah.
And read it, and that's pretty much it. And David's catching up.
I would start reading if Dan started actually running it.
Yeah.
But, like, that's the thing. You know, it's not going to happen, so...
Yeah, you gotta... So read the audience is a good takeaway from that game I shan't be running.
Yeah. And while I have ideas for campaigns, I don't have any that are specifically that detailed because... There are some campaigns I won't be running simply because there's no point in doing any research because they're in systems I know we're not going to do. So that's another thing is the system issue. And so, for example, Shadowrun, which I love as a setting because there's a lot of cool things.
And I would love to play it.
Yeah. But I can't think of an edition that I'd want to run it in because I haven't kept up with it since, I think, 2nd or 3rd edition, for a while.
The last Shadowrun books I had were... before I'd ever actually played an RPG, and it was still in like a D6 pool kind of mechanic.
And they've gone back and forth on whether you can hack in wirelessly or not. And I think they've gone back to you have to plug in now with a deck and all that other junk. And, I mean, I look at these books now, and I look at the systems, and just skimming it, and I'm just like, this is a lot of work for me to learn as just a GM, and how am I going to explain it to players? This is going to take weeks just to get up and running, and then... Yeah, it's just a daunting task, especially because we also have an audience that will actually call us out on our bullshit. So there is a bit about that I think is unique to our group, and that the podcast audience does matter. We do like the World of Darkness stuff
and we've already done a Nice Black Asian campaign. Yeah, so that is another thing.
We don't want to keep repeating ourselves. We don't want to get stuck in a rut. But Shadowrun is another one. There's one campaign. There's some pre-written campaigns I'd love to run or at some point, but I know they're probably not going to happen. Partially because they're out of print, and partially because of, again, interest in the players. Mm-hmm. And even the interest, actually, I could understand. But one would be Enemies Within, which is considered one of the best written campaigns of any RPG ever. But it's written for the first edition of Warhammer Fantasy, which was written back in the 80s, and it's already like the 3rd or 4th edition of Warhammer Fantasy, and it's still out. Enemies Within is out of print, and they never updated it for the newer edition. So I don't know. I'd have to buy it used. I have to buy Warhammer First Edition and learn it, and then I'd have to explain what Warhammer Fantasy is. It's Warhammer Fantasy, not 40K, by the way.
Yeah,
and
I already don't care.
Well, you would like the character creation system because you roll up your starting occupation, and you could be a rat catcher or a boatman or a
never mind, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly. A camp follower. I mean, that's what I loved about Warhammer is it's like fantasy, but your characters are about as vulnerable as Call of Cthulhu characters, and it's got a very unique. It's a European game, in terms of its sensibility and attention to detail, in terms of simulating medieval, early Renaissance kind of economics and politics. And the Enemy Within sounds great, but I've never even had a chance to read the book because it's out of print. I'm not going to spend $100 or whatever it is to buy a copy.
It's also from the 80s, which if we've learned anything from After Hours, we got to be real careful with anything written in the 80s.
Well, just a lot of people have said it's a really good.
Yeah. But you're the only person in the group who knows anything about Warhammer or cares about it. I hear Warhammer, I think miniatures, my wallet starts yipping in fear, and we slowly back away. Again, it's an audience thing. Yeah. And a mechanics thing, there is just the learning curve. Yeah. Which turns us off of things. So Continuum. I think.
What is Continuum for those of you?
I think people would be ravenous to hear a Continuum actual play, so they could learn how to actually fucking run it. But I'm not an astrophysicist, so I don't know how.
So Continuum, for those of you who aren't aware of this, which I do actually have a copy of it. It's out of print. I believe it's out of print.
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I saw somewhere that the company is still around, or there's one of the people who owns.
It's extremely well written.
It's a time travel RPG.
Yeah, it's a time travel RPG. Yeah. as written by an actual time traveler. Like, there is stuff in there that you would never, ever conceive of in writing your typical sci-fi time travel story.
Yeah.
But they cover it as like, well, time travel is not just time travel. It's really teleportation because the Earth's moving at thousands of kilometers through space. Yeah. And so you're really just mapping advanced calculus. And here's the thing. They don't just say that. You're doing that on your character sheet. Like, like it is very, very intense. And while you aren't actually doing calculus, like the minutia you have to go in to mark your jumps in time is just staggering. Like, and as level 1 characters, you can only move an hour forward and an hour back, and it's still just like trying to wrap your head around what it actually looks like at the table is just mind-boggling.
But that's basically Primer. I mean, like,
and that's the thing. I would love to run that game and try and plot that game out. And I mean, that's a hill I would die on, trying to write a cool time travel story. But it's not just that. Like, the advanced plotting you would have to do a cool time story like that, and the way you'd have to contort your brain to account for things the players would actually do in play that you didn't predict would just be a mind-numbing amount of work. And then you're going to throw on top of that this system from the early 90s that no one knows how to play, that you're going to have to learn from scratch with no models of how to do it. And
like they have a written example in the book of like how a game should go, but it's like, how the fuck could you do that unless you were just writing it like fiction where you know everything that's going to happen?
Exactly.
I mean, there's no way to track like, oh, well, I would have put a gun here. I would have put an extra magazine of bullets in this little in this desk while we were having this gunfight. Because I know I was going to have a gunfight here.
Yeah,
I'll just pop back an hour, give myself more ammo. Like, motherfucker, how? Yeah, like the only.
But that's a power in the game, and you do it in the moment. But Continuum is unique, and it does a bad choice, I think, in that you have to actually role play that in the future. You have to actually role play jumping back in time at some future age and giving yourself this gun, or you get killed in the future if you just erased from history. So you take frag is what it's called. But it's just effort shock. Like, Some campaigns you're not going to run because you realize how hard it is going to be to run that campaign. So Continuum is one of those.
I could see some sort of, possibly some kind of gumshoe hack that just like you preparedness, but like amped up to the nth degree.
Well, there's the Cthulhu Darky version hack of Continuum. And that's kind of cool. But yet again, I still don't know how to write for it. So I think other than mechanics, there's also effort shock on the story side of things. So while I'd be willing to take the Continuum challenge, I have an idea in my head for an Unknown Armies campaign that I'm probably never going to run. And it's not because I don't understand the system of Unknown Armies.
System's pretty easy.
So I've been, I read the book on your recommendation as being like one of the best RPG books ever written. Totally agree. Just fascinating from first page to the last. And they're doing a new edition of it. And I've talked to Greg about it, and it sounds awesome. So I'm like, oh man, it'd be really cool if we ran a campaign of that to play test it. And I'm like, I know what I would do. I would set it in Kansas City, but I would set it in like a gerrymandered district that no one was sure whether it was in Kansas or in Missouri. And so it'd be like this city in between cities, and it'd have all these magic powers. And I would bring all these new archetype characters in that have like the power of basic story structures. So the dead girl would give you quests, like the dead girl that you're on a quest for revenge in every fucking story ever. I would have these archetypes of like American politics, like the red and the blue, that are just like terrifying beings in their own respect, and all these ideas, like bibliomancers who think Rifts is the game and search.
That's just you. That's just you, though. That's just
search for it and meaning. And I would do all this like crazy, postmodern magic stuff. But I've also realized I've never read Tim Powers. It's not something I'm going to allow to go on forever. But Tim Powers is the tip of the iceberg on like stuff that influenced that book. And the amount of stuff I have read of it is enough to get me interested in it, but I don't think it's near enough to where I could run a satisfying and good campaign of it. And so yet again, full-time job, writing books, freelancing work. When am I going to get time to read these 7 or 8 or 9 novels? I'm not going to, so we're probably not going to run that game.
No, that's the same thing with me and Unknown Armies. Is the I haven't read Tim Powers either, and I have an idea for doing one set in Hollywood and like explore the the weird esoteric occult side of filmmaking and movie, especially like the low budget stuff, and media and pop culture and that sort of intersection. So, chasing after the artifacts of Ed Wood for, magical power and shit like that.
A lock of Tommy Wiseau's hair.
Exactly, yeah. Which you could probably, he would probably sell you. If you. I actually found out on TommyWiseau.com, you can buy a copy of the Room script. The actual shooting script, or supposedly.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, that's obviously a charge for your Sinomancers.
Exactly. B-movie mancer. But again, like for me, it would be also I know a lot of my earlier games have a tendency to get too abstract and too conceptual, too big picture, and not enough like here too much like Lost,
Yeah.
In other words, especially my earlier Carcosa games, and I've been trying everything in my power to avoid that kind of stuff and keep the game grounded so players know what's going on and why they're fighting or why they're investigating this or that. And with Unknown Armies, I feel like it would be so easy to go veer off the rails and just plunge into narrative, into a narrative black hole and just never come out and just be like, well, you're doing this for that and fuck.
Also like
you lose track.
The fiction in Unknown Armies is pretty good and creepy, but like in no way does it tell you how to run a game of it. Like, It is very entertaining and very well written, but it's not a group of player characters going together. And like a lot of stuff in the game actively deters you from, like, if you're going for avatar powers, you're all behaving in wildly disparate ways to achieve your different avatar powers. And if you're I forget what the other ones are called, but the people who just adepts, if you're like a dipsomancer versus or a
bibliomancer,
pornomancer, or a bibliomancer, like you have such a crazy worldview, and that's where all your power comes from. That's actually you're literally a group of people who have no fucking reason to be together. Like, even though you can do magic, you literally don't see the same reality. So like I never got it how you guys like had a goal and moved towards it.
That's a really good point, because I mean there are some types of stories that RPGs aren't very good at handling, and that's sort of, and like for example, I think that's why love stories aren't really, romantic stuff isn't really covered in RPGs, because RPGs are almost always have to be a group effort. Yeah, it's about a team of people, because you're getting a group of players together to do this.
It's hard to have a love story with an ensemble cast unless you're all like paired off and just creating Midsummer's Night Dream or something.
Or it's Romeo and Juliet and you're just like waiting for the two drama queen players to just off each other and be like, well, we got to kill each other now.
Yeah.
In which case, that's a weird scenario to split up like that. But like,
no, I'd love Romeo and Juliet would be great if you were just like a Capulet or a Montague as a role playing game. Like, I don't know, my like third cousin kissed some chick, so now we're sword fighting in the streets. I was a tanner 3 minutes ago. Like, I have no idea what's happening. That would be a great RPG.
Kind of a Rosencrantz and Guildenstern.
Exactly.
But see, there we go. That could be a fiasco game at least.
Yeah.
My cousin is dead. But it's not going to be something I'm going to be running. Another reason why, another campaign I'm probably not going to run is Beyond the Mountains of Madness. Which is another pre-written game, but it's one of the big Call of Cthulhu campaigns. And that's also because of the homework and just because it's a fucking huge campaign. I mean, it's several hundred pages, but it's also a lot of Antarctic survival shit. And so there's a lot of like homework that the GM has to do, and that the players, here's how you survive, and here's the gear you have. There's apparently like a whole session where it's just like inventory your shit before you leave, and that's just the amount of research I'd have to do to understand how to run that kind of stuff. And then for the players to want to do that, I mean, I'm sure from what I've read, there's a lot really good payoff. But there's lots of scenarios of like get from point A to point B and not die, from the cold. And that's maybe I could, now that there's Mythos Expeditions, which has really good expedition rules.
Yeah,
I might do that because I'm actually going to be testing those, playing those with the Australia chapter of Mask, which I'm running soon.
Nice.
I already tried a little bit about in Kenya, and the players almost died. But yeah,
well, like full survival stuff works in the short term. Like you can do a fall without end, but you can't do a mountain climbing campaign. Like, after a while, you get tired of like
it's samey, so it's like a dungeon crawling thing in that respect. And some players just don't like that.
Another thing I won't run is just because the parts of the setting I like can't outweigh the parts of the kind of fiction I dislike. I don't think I'll ever be running a fantasy campaign, even though I have one in mind that I really wanted to run. So I started reading some Joe Abercrombie, which I'd missed out on before, and some good stuff. Half a King was really good. And they're very good fantasy-ish novels, but they're very, low power.
Yeah.
Nobody's wielding, massive magic stuff. Very much Iron Heroes-esque.
Yeah.
And so I got this big idea because I've been reading up on post-apocalyptic stress syndrome, which is an actual diagnosis, talking about generational trauma and how it carries on, and like how illiteracy comes on like that. And it's a big case for reparations in America and other things. And so my idea for the fantasy setting was that you start off as typical dungeon crawlers, and the kingdom full of, crazy lich sorcerer monsters next door has suffered a successful revolution. And so you're like, hey, we're going to go loot these crazy, slave-owning dead wizards bases. And so you steal all this stuff from them, but then the rebels find you, and it turns out you stole like a potion of immortality or something. So you're not going to die unless you get stabbed with a sword. But they need you now. So the basic premise is like they've successfully overthrown, their lich overlords. But they are all illiterate. The entire country has PTSD from years of slavery and sexual abuse and beating. They have no culture. They have no ability to read. They have no civil service. They have no infrastructure. They're gonna collapse. But the Spartacus character that leads the revolution is like, well, I'm either going to paint you guys as Lich Kings we haven't gotten yet, and so we will hunt you until we die, because we have nothing better to do, because this whole thing's just going to collapse in a matter of years, or you help us get people in from other more successful nations to rebuild our society. And so the basic thing is that it's a series of mini campaigns, but the order you do it in is really powerful. So like if you achieve a state religion first, you're going to build this gigantic theocracy.
Right.
Whereas if you steal like the engineers, you're going to have these technocrats, but they're going to become gods and super powerful, because if you got the engineers before you got the educators, because they have no way to pass on their skills to future generations. So like it's all about like which vital societal function you get first, and I really love that idea. But then somebody's going to be like, I make water with my hands with magic, and I'm going to be like, well, the ecosystem and all of economics fucking collapses because you've defied the human condition. Like, nothing ever makes sense ever again. You can bring matter out of nothing. This is fucking stupid.
Post-scarcity economics.
And so, like, that's where I get off on the boat on nearly every fantasy setting.
Yeah.
Is magic is always like, poof, there's a thing, or poof, I can do this. And I'm just like, that ruins fucking everything. Like, that ruins the entire social strata. There's no reason to everything else. There's no reason to have religion as a concept we could ever recognize when there are gods you can go talk to who give you things. Like, it's not a matter of like faith when it's just like, please, I have magic powers now. Like, and so while I can only think of doing this setting in a fantasy setting, all the things that piss me off about fantasy aren't going to go away. And so it would ruin the good stuff I wanted to do.
Well, to be fair, there have been a lot. There's actually, you're not the first one to realize this. And there's been actually a lot of people, a lot of game designers, a lot of writers who have approached this problem, this issue, and there have been some really good solutions to it. I mean, even in D&D, like a lot of it is to I mean, like if you look at, for example, like Dark Sun is like, hey, if you use that magic is actually a metaphor for industrial power. It will ruin the environment and blah blah blah. So it's a self-solving problem.
Yeah.
It has a cost, an environmental cost, so it can be done, but yeah, if it's a lot too much work
but
for
yeah,
you.
I've read those, and I don't particularly like the solutions 100% for everything I do. Like, Dark Sun's great as a setting solution. I'm still playing D&D and miserable.
Yeah.
Because it's a D20 system, and why D20? Why?
Because it's not AD&D, and it's not Palladium. It was, you don't understand, man. At the time, it was better than anything else out there.
You know what? Model Ts were great, too. I still don't drive one.
Yeah, well, if you only had Model Ts and a fucking horse, you would choose the Model T.
I understand, but I don't have that choice to make.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the thing. And like the work I would have to do to get to where I like it, I don't think would be worth it. So that's another thing. And then another thing, which I should probably mention, is that while I find that interesting from a cultural perspective, you are essentially basically playing the Napoleonic slave uprisings. So like you have to be, very careful talking about shit upon which you have no frame of reference, which I truly have no frame of reference for anything that culturally horrific. Because I am not a Native American or an Aboriginal or anything like that. So
indigenous people.
Yeah. So, you could find yourself in some, hot narrative water because you bit off something that as a white male you're not meant to chew. I scrapped that idea.
And I've had ideas about similar things in terms, like, for example, reading up on the history of Brazil. When I was reading Fordlandia, which I mentioned some episodes ago, they talk about like the escaped slaves from the plantations who formed their own communities and had revolts, and that kind of thing is fascinating. And I would love to do something like a game exploring some of those concepts. But there's the amount of background to try and get it right, and also there's no real good system that models widespread social change. And that's another sort of issue. I mean, Reign has some of that, like with the company rules.
And that was my thing. I'm like, it has to be a Reign campaign. But then I was thinking about Fortunes of War. And the Reign mechanics, and then
don't hold Reign. Don't use Fortunes of War against Reign.
No, it's not. But it does sort of, it either minimizes your individual impact to the point where most characters are uncomfortable with it, or it's sort of cobbled in there in between the fight scenes.
Well, we haven't done a pure Reign game.
We have not done a pure
So we
Reign.
should maybe try that before we reserve judgment. But Fortune War, that's kind of like, I'm not going to run any more D20 campaigns. I'll probably run 5th Ed D&D games, but not a campaign. And I'm certainly not going to run anything from anything earlier. I liked 4th Ed D&D, but I'm certainly not going to run Pathfinder because I ran and I wrote like a lot of 3rd Ed material. And but I've just kind of the age of doing D20 combat no longer interests me, and everything else you do in D20 can be done more elegantly and more quickly and easily. I'm at the point as a GM, it's kind of interesting. I like games more where you get to sit and role play and just like not have to roll a lot of dice for combat, There are times I do like doing tactical combat, but those are like, for me, like especially like in Aaron's games, I like Aaron's been running Atomic Robo lately, which is a Fate game, and there are times where the times I'm most entertained, I have the most fun is when I'm just like my character is a human who thinks he's a robot. And Tom is a former Nazi dinosaur, Nazi scientist turned dinosaur.
Weird.
And I constantly bring up hold your bloodlust, former Nazi dinosaur. Please not to kill them. They are on our side. And Tom's like, what? I'm very fine. I'm fine. I'm not even angry. And so I keep constantly bringing it up, and I love that shtick. It's very fun just to constantly do it. And I bitch about the HR policy.
Lefty and the Cyclops.
Lefty and the Cyclops. Exactly. That's the kind of thing I love. Now is more of that character focused thing.
No,
So,
I agree. Yeah, and I mean, maybe that's just a sign of rage. I think we both do in both of our games when we do tactical combat. It's because it's kind of like the John Wick thing that he does in LARPs. If you've read his post, it's like you are now entering dire circumstances, so you never have to worry about your character dying in scenes until he says these are dire circumstances, and at which point you either run away because you're a sane, rational person, or you enter knowing that there's a possibility your character could die. So that when we do like big tactical combats, it's usually like a end of session kind of thing, like the big Jovian combat against the Ex-Humans, or big,
I was just thinking that
our big wheel in New Arcadia, or for me when you are fighting the Ultimates at the end of Scum Swarm, or you were on Earth, and it was very much about like, which flowchart path do you want to go down, and everyone was just like, it's very much like, you know that a bad roll will kill you, and that's what you're going for, but you can't keep that up all the time.
See, I really
exhausting.
See, I really enjoyed the tactical combat during the Jovian chapter. Especially when I actually went to the effort of making the map, or getting a map, and printing it out, and having you guys all like decide where you're going to go, and revealing the map step by step and all that stuff. But
it's fun as a set piece, and it's a chore every week.
You don't want to do it every week. Like, it took a lot more effort than I. So there's that as well, is that kind of so I couldn't. That's another reason why I'm not going to do a dungeon crawling campaign, because that would be every single week, and that does it does wear down on you, and that's actually like for the 13th Age, when I was running that adventure, we've done a 2-part adventure, and there's a lot of fights in that fucking adventure, and I cut out a lot of them because I knew I just didn't want to go through more than 1 or 2 fights per session. And
you know, I don't dislike 13. I think the escalation die is brilliant.
Yes, it's
brilliant as a D20 mechanic. So you're not doing just miss, 1 damage, miss. I think it is so much better. But then that adventure does throw in like 15 fucking fights, to the point where you're just like, that actually, I'm not so thrilled about the escalation die anymore. So,
it did help, but like, and that was the adventure itself, and I cut a lot of those fights out, because also you guys had good ways of getting around a lot of those fights by tricking your way in and that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I was desperate to get around some of those fights. I knew you were cutting stuff out, and there was still too much. Oh my god. When's my initiative again? All right.
One thing, that's actually reminds me of one of the other campaigns, the actually published campaign that's coming out soon, The Eyes of the Stone Thief, which is the 13th Age campaign about a living dungeon, like this living stone thing that eats towns and cities, and just like everything. It's just this, massive, constantly changing dungeon that moves through the ground. And I love that idea, and the problem with that, again, aside from the dungeon crawling thing, is it's fantasy. There's just a lot of things that are like, this is my jam, but no one else's. So I don't know how you would get around that.
And I played a cleric in 13th Age, and all I could do was point out the stuff that pisses me off by clerics, because I pray to my God, and it's not like nothing's going to happen. Something always happens. God's just unreliable. Like, it's not like whether he's there or not, or his true faith. There's no like leap of faith or Christian existentialism or anything like that. He is physically there, but he's kind of a dick, and he phones it in most of the time until he just makes you a superpowered badass, and then you can go back to like, oh well, you get a +1 now. Good for you. And other stuff to do. It's not like I can be everywhere at once, man. I'm just a god. So so
at least you didn't forget half of your bonuses like Aaron did. But I did. But on the other hand, there are some game systems that I don't think. I mean, I might run one shots, but like, oh god, what is that Robin Law system? The drama system, Hillfolk.
Oh yeah, I really want to run that.
Yeah,
but again, that's. Oh yeah, I have a campaign for that. I shan't be running.
Yeah,
we already talked about that. My Vice News campaign.
God, I really want to.
You're all young stoner journalist school dropouts who happen to be dressed cool enough to luck into the last vestige of actual profitable news media, and you're just like slouching and drinking your way through other people's social unrest and life-altering events as you're just like being the hipster who hangs out with the Afghani rebels. And like, I just think that would be like a great like newsroom.
God,
everyone's
that
27 on ecstasy and in the Syrian civil war. Like, I mean, yeah, that's why that isn't an HBO show already. Is only because
it is an HBO show.
Is only because HBO has the
actual
Vice show, and they can't make fun of them.
Yeah.
Like, and that Aaron Sorkin doesn't understand it enough to write.
It's
the news
too internet-y for him. You know, it's not middle-aged white guys being.
He wrote a hell of a version of Network 15 to 25 years after Network.
Yeah. So. And that actually reminds me, like, another campaign I would love to, I actually started, but it fell apart, was the Fallout GURPS game, because that actually has a lot of the stuff we're talking about, like societal changes, widespread stuff. And I actually learned the fucking mass combat rules in GURPS and made units, like, statted them out and shit like that. And, like, I got the rules down, and it was like, nope, couldn't get the people together again. But that would be awesome to do Fallout, you know, because that would, you could do your whole campaign idea in the Fallout universe.
Yeah.
Or for, like, the X-Slaves, you just pop them out of the vault.
It's really important which one you get first.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Change everything.
Yeah, get to the right vault. It works perfectly. It maps onto it pretty perfectly. But it's the only system I could use it in GURPS, because GURPS was the only one that could handle all that shit. The sci-fi elements, the mass combat rules, the crazy monsters, and handle it well. Because GURPS is...
It is GURPS.
It's good. It's not the best, but it's certainly not the worst for any choice. It's about the same for everything.
Yeah.
But there's no other system that is the same for everything.
Yeah.
So it has that kind of your utility. Yeah. So, but yeah. So what have we learned from all of this? Know your group.
Yeah, you need to know your group. You need to know your own limitations and your time.
Yes,
and how much you're willing to put into it,
and your creative energy, because you are not a limitless fountain of creativity. Like everyone has how much effort they can put forth every day, and the more you put into one project, the less you have for everything else. So, like as a GM, like I want to create really great games, but I can't spend 8 hours for every single of prep time for every single game.
Yeah, so like that's another thing, and taking into consideration, I have enough energy to put into redesigning this slave society from the ground up with no history, but I don't have energy left over after that to figure out how fucking god magic works. And then so you'd have to know your limitations in your time, your abilities to understand things. If you're running a podcast, you have to consider your audience beyond just your playing group. So, like,
that's kind of unique.
I'm probably not going to run a long-term Eclipse Phase campaign again, because I don't want to spit in the face of blind-ass luck for that it worked out.
I don't know. I think the listeners are going to probably voice their comments about begging you to run more, but it'll be like, run more, no evil.
I'd run a small, Eclipse Phase campaign that would have little or nothing to do with that. I would never run something that big and sweeping again.
Yeah.
But also you got to know what you like. So, like, I want to run something big with Red Mark. It's not just to play test the rules, but I'm finding that as we have more and more difficulty scheduling, I am a much better player and have more fun when we have more long-term storytelling things than if it's episodic. Wait, what did we do 4 months ago? Yeah. And then everything's kind of like this episode on Blur. Yeah. I need cable drama. I don't need, sitcom.
Law and Order.
Yeah, Law and Order. Yeah.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
These are their stories.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just my personal preference. Yeah. So that's another thing you have to take into account when games you will.
Yeah, when you're running a game, you have to do it for you more than anything else. Because, like, even if you do have the time to put in 8 hours for every 4-hour game you run or whatever, your players aren't necessarily going to reciprocate to the intensity that you desire. You know, like you may have done a shit handouts and all this other great stuff and maps and tactical combat or whatever else that gets them, and then they're like, yeah, no, that was fun, and then
you need to be balls deep in the middle of that Venn diagram. If you're doing everything for your players, you're going to be miserable. Like, if I ran Tom's perfect campaign, we'd be up to our goddamn eyeballs and lizard people, and I would be, trying to kill myself every day trying to write it.
This lizard person tells you what to do. He tells you to go shoot some guys.
Exactly. Whereas if Tom was in my game of like, you didn't look up what the Khmer Rouge was doing, and Tom would be like, oh God. He'd be miserable. Like, you have to find a middle ground.
You didn't understand the intra bureaucratic fights of the Khmer Rouge. You didn't understand that this department hated this department, and they argued and they fought. And
exactly.
Yeah, that you should have exploited that. You could have forged that paperwork. It would have been forging. It would have been in your alley. Yeah. So.
Or we'll do a drug dealing game that I'll find intensely, and then Aaron will have to play a drug dealer, which
he is killing a lot of cops.
It's going to become sad. Which is Aaron's understanding of current day drug dealers. So if you sell weed, you put on full body armor and go outside with a fully automatic shotgun and wave down. You just mow down.
Meth labs are grenade proof, right?
Yeah, they totally are.
Yeah,
right?
It just takes about 3 minutes to make a duffel bag of meth.
That you sell weed for a month and then you can afford Spec Ops military gear.
It's fun. It's a fun game. So, obviously Tom's not here, so no letter from Tom. But when we get back, we'll have anecdotes or shout-outs and then anecdotes. So, we'll be back.
Bye.
And we're back. We don't have, like I said, we didn't have a letter from Tom, but we do have a lot of shout outs. And we also have some very, very special anecdotes coming up from Eclipse Phase and Slasher Flick. First off, I would like to mention a novel I just finished called Dead Sea. It's from Tin Curran. It's a nautical horror novel, basically a modern-day freighter gets trapped in the Sargasso Sea, but it turns out to be an extra-dimensional, hell universe, basically.
Like you do,
yeah. Where there are many just wrecked ships and some crazy-ass monsters lurking in them and in about them. And it's a long novel. It's over 500 pages, and a lot of it is basically two groups of survivors from the freighter who are in life rafts and trying to survive. And like one life raft, there's the asshole who hates everybody, is trying to manipulate everybody, and it's just you want him to die horribly. And then the other one, like everyone kind of gets along, but they're going crazy because they hear things out in the fog. And one thing is, it's a novel that has a lot of descriptions of fog in it, like really weird, unearthly. It's like a Lovecraftian novel. It's like you get some very vivid fucking descriptions of fog, man. If you want to read about fog, this is your novel. Or mist too, but it has some great monsters in it. It has the scene. I told you about the scene where they are the sequence where they enter the USS Cyclops, which is a 19, and there is just, I think it's a very inventive like scare, like building of tension. And so I will put a link to an ebook version of it that's legitimately available for free. I don't know if there's an audiobook for it or not, but it's a fun read, especially if you like horror. And the ending's a little rushed, but that's probably because the opening is kind of very slowly paced. I mean, there's like 100 pages of them like, we're on a raft. Oh God, there's the thing out there. Okay, went away. Oh God, it's attacking us. Oh God, we're okay. Just back and forth, back and forth. So there's that. There's a novel you've just finished, right?
Yeah. So I finished Wolf in White Van by John Darnielle. I think that's how it is pronounced. He's the lead singer of the Mountain Goats, which have some of the best lyrics ever. If you haven't listened to No Children before or any of the stuff he did on Moral Oral, it is.
Oh, he's a moral or
well, he didn't do the show, but they used his music a lot.
Okay, but I'm sure I've listened to him before.
Yeah, it's all about like, let's talk with our friends about how much we hate each other, about divorce.
It's like everything immoral.
Yeah.
It's depressing.
Or I will get through this fucking year even if it kills me. Yeah, like just really great lyrics. So Wolf and White Van is about it's non-linear. It's about a guy who has a terrifyingly deformed face. I won't ruin how, because that's the main premise of the novel, is how it happened. But I got interested in it because it is highly literary and it is extremely well written. And it's how this guy's face just alienates him from his family and the rest of the world. But the way he makes his living as an adult is that before the accident that caused him his deformity, he was into all sorts of nerdy stuff like Conan and and like metal and all that stuff like that. And he begins imagining things while he is convalescing for literally years, recovering from this injury. This gigantic post-apocalyptic play-by-mail RPG called The Trace Italian, named after the fort. And like intermixed between the chapters will be descriptions of things that are happening in Trace Italian and the different choices you have. And so like there's this guy's life, and there's like a satanic panic thing regarding his game that comes up, and it's all sorts of stuff. But everything is interspersed amongst this like post-apocalyptic. You could do this, or you could do this, and then like stuff players write in that they want to do for their moves.
Yeah.
And every time he has a move, he picks out a new, sheet of paper.
Yeah.
Because he's got it pre-planned of what they're going to do, and then he mails that, and they send him a new move. So it's got a lot of great stuff about RPGs in it, stuff about just being nerdy in general, and it is very much about, painful adolescence and, being alienated from the world of your parents and stuff like that.
Yay, the modern condition.
Yay! It is a novel by a white man that is not about how sad it is that he does not get laid more. The protagonist does not drink like a badass or despair the modern condition.
Okay.
He's generally pretty optimistic despite having a fucked up, terrifying face. Like, it is refreshing as a male protagonist.
So I sent you the link to this. I didn't hear your response back, but MFA Workshop Guy, the Twitter account.
Yeah.
I should put a link to that.
That's definitely worthy of a shout out.
Yeah, so that's a parody Twitter account of basically making fun of that guy in every MFA writing workshop you've ever been in, if you've ever been in one, where he writes about how he thinks he's writing the tradition of Hemingway and Carver and everything else. And
it's like, I think your character should have more sex to prove he doesn't need women or something.
Yeah.
Something terrible. Like, everything's something terrible.
Yeah.
Like,
the woman accepted her position as a metaphor,
Yeah. It's pretty bad.
Yeah, no, so that Twitter account is worth looking at. It's very fun, kind of like YA dystopian fiction. She was plain and clumsy. How could she be the gifted one, the chosen one?
Yeah, pretty much.
But speaking of things that aren't like that, Jazzpunk is a video game. I got it on the latest Steam sale, or the holiday Steam sale, and I went through it. It only takes a few hours to play through, but basically it's a parody of first-person shooters and video games in general, where you're playing a secret agent trying to do things and of a spy-ish nature, but it involves... It's kind of hard to explain because it's basically sort of an absurdist parody of the genre. So, shooting birds down with mind control rays, playing. There's a great mini game in it called Wedding Quake with a spelled Quake, and so you go into it and you're like, it's like at a wedding, and so you grab bottles of champagne to shoot little campaign corks, or you get a wedding cake and it's like a Gatling gun. So it's like Quake, only it's wedding themed. So Wedding Quake.
Nice.
So Jazzpunk is quite amusing. And it's, I only paid a couple bucks for it. So it only took me a couple hours to beat.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's worth the 15 that it retails for. But if you can get it on sale, I'd go for it.
Yeah.
And other games, a big game came out in terms of the video game scene, Hotline Miami 2.
Yeah, we have been playing that.
I've not beaten it yet. I don't think
I've been getting my ass kicked and frustrated at that. It is punishingly difficult.
It is much harder than the original, and the original was not easy.
Yeah, it was not easy.
Yeah, the level design is a little problematic in that the original was a lot about going into small areas and killing lots of dudes in different ways. This one has lots of very long corridors and
This
rooms.
was very much about like camping, popping out, shooting.
Yeah,
Camping, popping
the
out,
world's
shooting.
deadliest game of peekaboo.
Yeah, it is not as frenetic as the first one I found.
And you switch
to-
characters a
yeah.
lot. So
Unless the one you do succeed, because something always goes wrong and it kills you. But the one time it doesn't kill you, it's usually because you improvise some massive weapon throwing, grabbing, badassery,
desperate, yeah.
and you get through. But then you don't really even remember what happened because you're just so fucking thrilled that you've beaten the level after your 80th try. Like you're just like, I don't even care how cool it was. Yeah, I just want to move on.
this is true. There are a couple of
And the story makes less sense. You'll be happy to know. It is all over
I'm reserving
the place.
I'm reserving judgment until I actually finish the thing.
Fair enough. I suppose I should too, but it is...
So far, it is not.
But yeah, then I finished Hotline Miami,
Yeah.
the first one, and was not particularly wowed by the ending either. Other than its... metafiction game wankery. Kill the creators of the game.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Edgy.
Well, come on. Video games are a new genre or a new medium. They have to work their way up.
Fair enough.
We haven't gotten to Bergman or Fellini yet, all right, of video games. So the soundtrack is amazing though.
Oh my god.
It's even better
Perturberator was a perfect choice.
And there's so many others. I mean, it's a much larger soundtrack. And I'm definitely gonna be listening to the soundtrack a lot. I have a thing where I try to beat a game before I download and listen to the soundtrack, is because I don't feel I've earned it.
Yeah, I bought the special pack just so I could download the soundtrack.
I bought the special edition so I could play Jacket in Payday 2, who is a character from Hotline Miami 1 who he's mute, he doesn't talk in the game. So for Payday 2, when he talks, he uses a tape recorder. So you have a tape recorded voice of a woman saying things, which is amazing.
From what sounds like a language learning tape.
Yeah, it randomly changes into Russian or Italian. So it's very... entertaining. But yeah, it's Hotline Miami 2 is definitely it has some really fun levels into it. It has great music. Everything else went away until I finished.
Yeah, it's definitely a buy.
Yeah.
Either way. I have another book I forgot about.
Oh yeah.
I finished Annihilation. It's the first one of the Jeff Vandermeer's Southern Reach trilogy.
Oh yeah.
Very weird. If you like your weird fiction weird, it is weird.
So is it? It's not.
It is weird.
It's not quite normal, is it?
No.
It's weird.
I would even go as far to call it weird.
Weird.
So yeah, I mean, it's the guy who did The Weird, the compilation of every weird short story worth talking about ever, which I am still hacking my way through like a jungle. You'll hit a good one, and then you'll just move along for like 3 or 4 stories.
I skip around.
And then
that
you
was my
just
survival
skip into
story.
a stop.
Yeah.
What can you expect? It is not Lovecraftian at all. In other than that, it's inexplicable. So there is the Zone X, which is managed by a mysterious governmental organization called the Southern Reach. And something about Zone X, you can only enter and leave it under hypnosis, or that could just be something that the group does to you. So the basic premise of the book is that it's narrated by the biologist, and the biologist is with the engineer, the linguist, and the psychologist, and they're all 4 women, heavily armed and filled with cappy equipment, that move into the Southern Reach. And then things get weirder and weirder and weirder. People before them may or may not have turned into animals. There's a never-ending, like, House of Leaves, like, staircase. They're called the Tower. Everyone calls it the Tower, but they don't know why, because it's underground and goes down. There's a weird lighthouse with, like, bloodstains all over it, and like betrayals and moving plants and lost like creatures, and by the end of it I still have no idea what happened. So perhaps I should read the other 2 books.
Probably.
But if you are into intense, bizarre, creepy weirdness, it's got a lot of it. It's got very much like, oh, my husband came back from his expedition, but that's not my husband, even though he looks like my husband and talks like my husband. And yeah, it's just, it's like Roadside Picnic.
Yeah.
If they were going into the zone to take lichen samples instead of
artifacts,
like get rich off. Yeah. It is very much like, it is very bizarre. So
nice. I like it. Speaking of other sort of weird things, there's a Kickstarter going on for for an RPG called Witch. This is from Angry Hamster Games, and this is where you play a witch who makes pacts with demons for powers to do, adventurous things, but you have different traditions of witches. You could be a lich, a bokor, or so it looks. They sent me a playtest packet, and I've read through it. Looks not through the entire thing, but from what I've seen, it looks really cool. It has really cool art. It's going on for another week and a half, so give it a check out if you like that kind of game. It reminds me a lot of a World of Darkness type game. You're a supernatural thing with different traditions, and you're fighting another supernatural thing that's worse than you are. So it gives me that kind of vibe, but it has a different system. And demonic pacts are always fun topics for games. Yay! And also Dark Things, Necropolis, a video game that is currently in production from Harebrained Schemes. They did a little thing called Shadowrun Returns, and Dennis Detwiller, one of the Delta Green co-authors, is currently working on Necropolis. And in this one, it is a roguelike third-person action game where you go through a randomly generated dungeon and kill monsters, try not to die. You're going to die a lot, is what it looks like. They revealed some gameplay footage of it at PAX East this year, and it looks quite fun. I can't wait to play it.
Yeah, I love your little stabby pixely legs.
Yes, yeah, you very spindly legs. Yeah,
very
and
sharp legs.
I like how the player characters have randomly generated names, so you don't name yourself. It's kind of like, you're blah blah blah, the Blackguard. Go on and okay, now let's get that knight in here. Let's get So, let's see here. And also, speaking of dying horrifically underground, I saw a horror movie recently called The Pyramid, which came out last year, and it is not quite a found footage film, although there is some found footage within it. It's about archaeologists in Egypt that find a 3-sided pyramid, so think like a giant D4. But they uncover the entrance to it, and they're like, let's go in. Oh no, there's riots in Cairo. We have to leave. Well, we can send our NASA bot in. That $3 million robot we rented from NASA. We could shit. Oh no, something broken. It's a $3 million robot. We have to go and get it. We won't tell anybody we're going.
The robot dies in pursuit of the MacGuffin. The robot becomes the MacGuffin.
Yeah, no, I like it.
MacGuffin vampirism.
It's a chain of MacGuffinism. And of course they all get, well, let's go back. Oh wait, we got lost. Oh no, we fell down. And then the thing, I like it.
And then they all died.
I don't want to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it. And they don't all die.
Incredulous look.
Yeah, well, you just have to watch it to find out. It has some good death traps in it. Yeah, death traps. And some good monsters. And it's a fun sort of B movie. Pretty good production value. I mean, they shot it in. The set looks like a pyramid, and the monsters look pretty good. So yeah, I had fun. You saw. I know this is a bigger movie, but you saw Chappie.
I saw Chappie. I think it's worth mentioning because I don't know what all the mixed reviews are about. Because I think it's sort of a return to form from Neil Blomkamp.
Yeah,
I kind of hated Elysium. I don't want to say hate, but the longer I thought about that movie,
the less you like it.
The less I like it. Why do we need to microwave those robots? Really unnecessary stage of the production process.
Poorly. I know OSHA isn't very powerful in this day and age, in that day and age, but you'd think they'd put more of a safeguard for.
I just want to say, for a Hollywood movie that can give me a fucking functioning Taurus habitat.
Yeah.
but you can't explain why you had to microwave your fucking robots. Like, there's a disconnect.
It's not even microwave. It's like bombarding with lethal gamma radiation because he doesn't fry instantly. He's just like,
it doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Yeah.
And Matt Damon's apartment's bigger than my entire house in the grim, dark, overpopulated
real estate's
future.
cheap there, all right?
Apparently, in Los Angeles. You couldn't get an apartment like that in Los Angeles now.
Well, yeah.
If you were Matt Damon, you couldn't get that apartment. It just needed like a coat of paint.
Notch could get that apartment.
Yeah.
Well, Notch has a $70 million house now.
Intensely disliked.
Yeah. I like the gunfights. I forget about the rest of the movie.
And I liked that too. But here's the thing. Chappie has those gunfights, but also isn't fucking stupid. And is actually a pretty good, like, AGI story. So the way I do it, a lot of the reviews I read that didn't like it hated D. Antwoord for their prominent roles in the film. And it's just like their acting. And the one I just totally don't understand is that it found them to be unsympathetic characters. So basically the premise of the film is that Dev Patel is a AI researcher. He works for a massive robotics firm that has created functioning AI policemen that have reduced the crime-ridden dystopian hell that is 2016 Johannesburg into a livable place. But he is a advanced head-in-the-sky AI researcher, and so at home he is working on a legit AI program, but is actually an AGI program. So it starts from baseline, but through interactions with people, it learns like a child, just infinitely faster. So he's trying to do it, but he can't do it. But so there's this one robot unit that is, going to be scrapped, and he steals it. But on his way home to make his AI baby, he is kidnapped by the crazed gangers in the actual South African rapper De Antwoord, who want him to develop a remote that turns off the police bots because crime's getting really hard. They have to paint their BIM4s pink to confuse their target acquisition because they think they're kids with guns. So they're like firing M4s with like pink and yellow Uzis and like all sorts of stuff like that. And like a lot of really clever set design. And they look like De Antwoord, so they look fucking crazy. But then they realize he has a bot in the back, so they're just like, turn him on. And he's like, no, he's a fucking AI. We can't. This has never happened in history before. And they're like, I'm going to shoot you in the head. So he's like, okay. So he turns it on, and so Chappie is being raised, but he's being raised by these psycho gangbangers. So it's not really a movie about AI, and which is why it just blows my mind that critics don't get it. It's a movie about abusive childhoods. It's just on fast forward because they teach Chappie to be a robot gang member. Like, they give him bling, they abuse the shit out of him, they develop massive trust issues in him, he becomes oppositional defiant, and he just gets worse and worse as they like. But that is how all these gangbangers were raised. And so, like, it's just a really advanced AI take on child abuse.
Wow.
And I really thought it was brilliant. But it's also, like, redeeming because Chappie ends up making his own choices and, like, overcoming his upbringing. And you are sympathetic towards De Antwoord if you understand anything about how poverty works on people.
Yeah.
The only bad part of the movie is, in my opinion, Wolverine, what's his name?
Hugh Jackman?
Hugh Jackman's character, because they make him like
Javert?
They make him like Smiley Whiplash evil. Just like cartoon evil. He's like the jock from an 80s movie combined with like fucking
someone who tortured Rambo.
Yeah, pretty much. It's just really bad, and it doesn't make any sense because if he were not dumb as hell, he would have a legitimate goddamn reason to attack Chappie because he learns to talk in a day. He learns the entire English language from just watching us for a day.
Yeah.
And so Hugh Jackman's character easily could have been like, in 2 months, this thing is going to launch the nukes. Like, Dev Patel invented Skynet and he gave it to some gangbangers. Like, he could very easily be just like, no, there is a legitimate theoretical philosophical standpoint that says as a human being, it is my moral duty to my species to kill the shit out of that thing as hard as I can. But no, it's more like, you stole my funding, Dev Patel. Now I'll kill your robot child.
For the listeners at home, Caleb was twirling an imaginary mustache.
Yes, and he is by far the weakest part of the film. Not because of his acting, just because, like, I feel like that's a clear missed opportunity. He could have been a really evil villain who just had an understandable motivation.
Yeah. No.
Because, by the end of it, Chappie is our new machine god. It's only a matter of time. He could have just been like, that's probably a bad idea. Stephen Hawking told me so. So that's the only flaw in the film I was bothered by. I feel like most of the reviews missed the point entirely. So you should go watch it.
A lot of reviewers miss the point in sci-fi films.
So it's like District 9 again.
Yeah.
Like, it's a worthy sci-fi film that has something to say about being human. Like, unlike Elysium, which had no redeemable qualities. Other than cool gunfights.
Yeah. I like the ending of Elysium could be just like a very subtle point of, and I'm just totally bullshitting now for the sake of arguing.
I know.
But, about how the humans tend to overestimate their own abilities, or the idea of that, what's that? The Peter Principle or something like that. Oh, we could save these dozens of people with our 5 hospital ships can save millions of people with our super fancy tech. Because it's a tragedy in the making. We just don't see that part. We just don't see the day after when the riots break out and everyone dies.
Fucking terrible.
I know.
It's a terrible movie.
It was a terrible movie. Speaking of, things that might not be terrible, you also watched Powers recently because it's on the PlayStation Network.
All right. More reserved endorsement there. They do some things that I think are interesting.
Well, just for those who aren't familiar, it's a TV show, police procedural about policing superheroes and villains.
Yeah, okay.
Based on the comic book.
Retro shout out. If you're not reading Bendis's Powers trades, stop whatever you're doing and go buy all of them right now.
Yeah.
They're all fantastic. The only problem with the comic is that for some reason he does other shit before Powers, even though Powers is by far the best thing he's written. And that's saying something for Brian Michael Bendis. Omeg's art is amazing. Storylines are amazing.
Dialogue's good.
Dialogue is the best in any comic I've ever read. Deanna Pilgrim is the most enjoyable character to read in comics. So, they do some stuff that is just frankly baffling to me in the show. And so it's on the PlayStation Network, but they have a release schedule. So it comes out every week. So I'm going to go home and watch the new episode. You can't binge watch it like Netflix. So that's one thing I wish I would have known. But I already have a PlayStation Plus account, so it's no big deal. I didn't pay anything for it. Sharpedo Copley, speaking of Elysium, and Chappie, he is Chappie and Chappie. He has some things he does really well, and they have some other things he doesn't have the range for. So he plays Walker. He plays the lead,
who is basically who in the comics is Batman. He looks like Batman from the cartoons.
In the comics,
he's a detective, but
I'm not going to spoiler alert you about this, but in the show they reveal what they reveal in the comics, and trade paperback number 4 in the first episode is in that Walker used to be a power, so he knows all of the superheroes, and they know him because he used to be high level. He lost his powers, and rather than sit around and drink himself to death, he actually applied himself and became a cop. Yeah. But he's still very tortured about the fact that he used to be able to fly, and he used to be a god, and now he is
a dude
with a gun, and who needs to hide whenever the criminals come, because they can literally all kill him with his eyes. So that is just literally in the first 10 minutes of the show. They just drop that in the middle of it. Don't know why they didn't do that. They shoot it instead of noir, like the comic book is shot. They shoot it like a CBS cop show. It is intensely, brightly lit. Everything. So, there are times where the scenes look so shitty, it's like Constantine levels of just why would you do this to this property? Yeah. Deanna Pilgrim is played by a girl who'd be much better to play the cop that replaces Deanna Pilgrim midway through the series, because she delivers some Deanna Pilgrim lines, but she doesn't have the snark. And she's not like spunky, skinny, nervous, enough and with the foul mouth that makes the good character. But they do a lot of cool stuff because by making it a CBS show, it is really not about superpowers. It is a show about fame. So they're often talking about how superheroes are dicks because they no longer have to grow because everything is given to them.
Yeah.
So Retro Girl, in the trade paperback, she is dead within the first issue.
That's basically the hook of it.
Yeah, it is called Who Killed Retro Girl. She's made it into episode 4 so far, and she's basically like Julia Roberts. Like, she's just so famous she can't go anywhere, and everything she does like shifts the society around her, and she hates most of humanity as a result of that. But she's a good guy because she's barely containing that disdain. Like, Trip Hammer, which is the Iron Man analog in the comics, is very hateful and motivated for spite because he doesn't have powers, and simultaneously motivated by fear of everyone he knows because he is a human being who remembers what it is to be a human being, and powers scare the shit out of him, so he does everything he can to police them. So there's stuff like that. Johnny Royale, who's like a bit player in the comics, is by far the most interesting character in the whole show. What would a guy who could teleport literally anywhere with a thought be like? And they play it pretty good. Like, he's kind of ADD sometimes.
Yeah.
He just pops in for lines of dialogue and leaves, and you don't know where he's gone. He's very conflict avoidant because why would he fuck with this? He could go anywhere else. So yeah, there's good stuff there. And then they made Eddie Izzard Wolf, which I won't ruin in the comic because I doubt they're going to do it the same way. But he's like the super evil power who they have to lobotomize every 5 minutes. That's the only way they keep him from destroying the prison. There's literally a guy in front of him every 5 minutes stabbing an ice pick through his tear duct and then just waiting for him to heal again. Like, which is really creepy, but I don't know why they're doing it that way. I think they just did it because Eddie Izzard is British.
Yeah.
I would like to see him play someone funny. So, very mixed reviews. A 5.1 out of 10. Like, it can do one more thing wrong before I throw up the controller in disgust.
Yeah, well, series has to get its legs, but it sounds like...
I'm going to reread Powers, just because I want to remember what it's like.
I should reread Powers. It's been a while since I
it's so good.
I know, it is. So I think that's enough for our shout-outs. But we have some anecdotes. So first off, we're getting close to the end for the Duality, the Eclipse Phase campaign I've been running for quite some time. Mm-hmm. And we had a brief foray into Ultimate Society on their station Zyphos, which I chose to set during their 3-day Bacchanalia / party / Olympics, because I figured that would be a good way to infiltrate some firewall agents is when everyone's partying. So in the book, it describes that there are games held so the Ultimates could test each other. But it specifically mentions that the Ultimates are more than just musclehead warriors, that they want to be just being good at something. It's competence in something. So I said, players, all right, so you have to compete in order to fit in, to go on undercover. But I'll let you choose what skills you will put to test. And so David was like, protocol and perception. And I'm like, okay, Deadly Tea Party.
Wait, you didn't plan for that?
No, I didn't know what skills.
Oh man, I was ready to toot your GM horn.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess I am for a different reason for improvisation. I thought you were slow playing us. Yeah. Like when you said, "Well, there can be a game for anything on your character sheet," and we literally said anything.
Yeah.
And you're like, "Yeah, anything you want on your character sheet," and I'm just like, "Well, this was a huge goddamn mistake." So I instantly see everyone just dive into their character sheet for the highest ridiculous skill they fucking have. Like, no one's gonna pick combat, nobody's gonna pick anything rational. They're always gonna pick like whatever they have highest on their sheet that is most bullshit. I did the same thing. But David instantly goes protocol with like just the shit-eatingest grin on his face. Like, it's literally like the Futurama Hermes bureaucrat off is what I'm expecting. And then you're just like, without missing a beat, Deadly Tea Party. I thought you were just like slow playing us. Like, you knew what we were going to call. And then you're just like, I got you, you fuckers. Deadly Tea Party. But no, way to play it close to the vest.
Yeah, so the premise, well, it was protocol and perception. So
yeah, you didn't let it phase you at all, though. You're just instantly Deadly Tea Party. I thought you had it all planned. I thought, like, I do stuff like that in games. I don't know, I guess you do this. I know what you're going to fucking do. And then you do it, and I'm just like, fuck you. I'm ready for that. But you weren't. It was just, yeah, it was good poker face.
So Deadly Tea Party is perception and protocol. So it's having a tea party for a hypercorp oligarch because in the ultimate still have to negotiate with the hypercorps, and
they have to play bodyguards.
You have to play bodyguards and assassins occasionally. So the idea is that you and the other person, one plays the defender, one person plays the assassin, and so they're having the tea party with some actor who's some indentured sleeved into a splicer body, who will actually be killed if he drinks the poison or takes the poison. So the assassin gets to choose what type of poison and how it's going to be delivered. It could be contact, it could be slipping something in the drink or whatever else.
I should be clear, you made David's night. Like,
yeah.
In every scene waiting for Deadly Tea Party, he was frantically on his phone researching everything about tea.
And so the idea was you get to choose whether you're the defender or the assassin. So you had to make protocol checks to, do the tea party part, right? And then you had to make perception checks to figure out when to place the poison or how that other guy was going to place it. And David fucking he blew his moxie. He rolled well. I mean, he was on that shit. And so he did so well. He basically became made the highlight reel of the first day of the Olympics with his Deadly Tea Party.
Which I had a blast imagining, space luge, knife fighting, tea party. What a great jump cut. That must have been a great sizzle reel.
Yeah.
Just in the middle of it, somebody serving tea, then back to an explosion.
Oh, he's put the cyanide in the drink! Yeah. Let's see if he sips it. Oh, he sipped it!
I hope it was that VJ hype man from the Ugandan action film.
Oh, yes.
Running commentary for it.
Yeah.
Party, party, party.
Tea, tea, tea. Poison. Oh, is he going to poison? Oh, he poisoned.
Yeah.
So Deadly Tea Party, David eventually used that to basically get laid or make out with the target because he was so popular as a result of that. So yeah, Deadly Tea Party. No, I just
he sugar dicked him.
Yeah, he sugar dicked him. Honey dicked him.
Honey dick. Sorry.
Yeah. So that was the first game like that, but it wasn't the last. So I recently ran Slasher Flick, and I think you're the one who came up with the idea of. I know we've discussed before, but
you guys made me watch John Wick.
Yeah,
and I'm like, well, we should play Slasher Flick, only we're random Russian mobsters, and we're fighting John Wick, who is a goddamn elder thing. He teleports, he moves beyond human speed, he's preternaturally aware of his surroundings. Oh god, we could do a whole podcast just about the insanity of that fucking movie.
Again, the key for that film for me is that one time right in the bathhouse that he just looks at the guy he's trying to kill and just shoots a guard instead of him. He's just no, look at this. This is going to happen to you. Boosh. But
it's just the most brilliant filmmaking decision I've ever seen, in that Keanu Reeves can't act. So whenever Keanu Reeves' name is mentioned, have every other actor in the movie
do the
act their asses off. Just eat the scenery, going insane, hearing John Wick's name. Just lose their gut, cry blood, start swearing to every god they know, throw things. It's like an Al Pacino off anytime the name John Wick is mentioned. And it works.
It does.
I was thoroughly entertained.
For Slasher Flick, you normally have players make a pool of characters, not just one character each. Everyone gets one primary character. Then there's a pool of secondary characters, and then there's a slasher like a Jason or a Freddy or some sort of monster that kills all of them except like a few.
And it's a brilliant mechanic because the players are incentivized to feed their secondary characters
because then they get genre points.
Because then they get genre points to use on their main character to help you survive.
At the end,
which is brilliant.
It is. It's a great mechanic. And so instead, I had the players make characters that were basically 1980s action film bad guys. So there was the demolition guy. There was the guy who was basically the bad guy from Highlander 1, Clancy Brown.
Did anybody get Fat Freddie Mercury in a chainmail shirt from Commando?
That's
my favorite 80s villain ever.
I wish.
Tubby Freddie Mercury in a chainmail shirt.
Matrix. No, that was...
Matrix was the hero of that film.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Yeah, I know he yells out Matrix at one point, but... Yeah, so there's like a pool of 16 characters, and Thad was there, and Dan and Michelle there were they were there as well, along with Sean and Ann. It was their first game trying the slasher flick, and Ann was not even that well aware of 1980s action film, the canon, so we had to explain some things, but she got into it quite well, and they were facing Jack Shade, he was Special Forces in Vietnam before he became the only American to be a detective in Hong Kong, and then he was a bouncer at a roadhouse, and so on and on and on and on. So I made him and of course he had a mullet,
until they killed his dog,
until they killed his ex-wife. So like they decided to lure him out because they kidnapped some people, and
want to say your role-playing game premise now officially makes more sense than the entire plot of John Wick. Just want to be clear, it's far less absurd than the plot that moves together that multi-million-dollar movie.
To be honest, his motives are... I don't even question John Wick's motives. He was just looking for an excuse to kill again.
It's legit just a dog he owned for a day.
Yeah.
It's not even like old Yeller.
Do you know whose motives I question in that movie? His buddy assassin.
William Dafoe.
Yeah, William Dafoe.
I'm going to die for this dog I never met.
I'm going to die for John Wick. Jesus fucking Christ. You think he would be smart enough to get out of town after he betrays the mob. But
that's the thing.
Yeah.
Somebody said John Wick's name next to Willem Dafoe, and his Al Pacino off was insane brotherly love. Just ruthless devotion.
So while the players were making characters for this, Dan and Michelle were on their way. So I just said, you guys make characters for them. And so one of the primary characters was Krell, who looked specifically like Clancy Brown from Highlander 1. And it was a shirtless warrior from the wastelands with a sword. And that suggested that one of his abilities was hot piece of man meat. And Michelle played him, and
because Krell had all the ladies in Highlander, if I recall.
Yeah,
they loved those filed down teeth.
Yeah, exactly.
He looks like a guy you want to take home to mother.
So halfway through the game, Jack Shade has murdered quite a few characters. So he tracks Krell down into a corridor with a fan rotating slowly in the background and some electrical conduits. At least that's how I imagine it. I don't think I specifically mentioned that, but you can picture it that way.
We need that flavor text in future.
Yeah.
It's just good GMing.
No, I know. There's a lot to keep track of. There's a lot of moving parts. And so they start fighting. They start sword fighting, with katanas. Obviously. Hattori Hanzo.
Did they have guns and they threw it down because this was personal?
No, not yet.
No, not yet. Okay.
Yeah, but... so what happened is Michelle was actually rolling pretty well. And then so... she says, you know what? So I say, okay, you lock blades. You're looking at each other face to face. What do you do? All right, I use a hot piece of man meat and I go over and I kiss him. And I'm like, all right, roll. And she rolls like a 4-8, which is like a critical hit.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, and the game just kind of stopped. We're just like laughing our asses off so much that I say, the kiss lingers for a second, for several seconds. And then he flees.
I don't want to wait.
Yeah. You killed his ex-wife, but now he's questioning a lot of things. So
it's like Top Gun if it was honest.
Yeah, exactly. This, like Thad mentioned, the covert homoerotic subtext became overt homoerotic text. It's right out there in the open. Dudes making
We solved it, 80s.
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
welcome.
So I don't want to spoil what happens to the Krell Jack Shade pair up at the end, but it's other
Spoiler alert: they open a bed and breakfast.
Yeah, one of the players had diplomatic immunity, which he used to some success. Tom blew some things up. Let's see what else. There was just a lot of murder and a lot of death, and not many player characters made it out. I had one optional house rule. Like I didn't say. So you're all part of the evil gang. You're hired to do this heist, to do all these things. But we're not going to reveal who the real mastermind of the gang is until there's only one primary character left. The last person alive turns out to be the real bad guy all along. So
nice.
You'll have to listen to find out. So that'll be posted soon. But yeah, that was a fun game.
Sad I didn't make that one.
I did. Well, we'll have to do another. It works so well. It's hard not to. Try it again. But anyways, I think that's a good way of wrapping up episode 112, Campaigns I Shan't Be Running. This is Ross Payton.
I'm Caleb.
And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Bye.